Thank you, Mary and Renee, for joining us this evening, and thank you all who submitted questions for this conversation tonight. So, Renee, I'll start with you. From your experience, what are some of the most common ways children are affected by family separation? And how might those effects differ depending on things like a child's age, personality, or the level of conflict between parents?
Look, as it's sort of discussed in the film, children are deeply affected by separation, and we really need to recognise that they're going to respond in lots of different ways depending on their age, their personality, and most importantly, the level of conflict that the parents have. We have a beautiful book called What About the Children, and it talks about the exact developmental stages of a child and how that separation is going to impact them differently. So younger kids will notice things like regression, maybe in sleep or bedwetting, clinginess, crying. Kids kind of in that middle age group, middle primary, tend to kind of suppress, a bit like what's discussed, suppress their emotions a bit. And adolescents can have totally different. Sometimes it's about rejecting a parent. But we really know that it's the conflict that impacts. So if we can reduce the conflict between parents, we can reduce that impact.
Thank you, that's very informative. Mary, do you often come across any misunderstandings or assumptions parents have about how separation will impact their kids?
Yes, I do. Look, one of the main things that we hear regularly is that children are resilient and they will just bounce back and we can all just get on with it. What we find all the time is that when children don't understand big changes or those big changes aren't acknowledged, they blame themselves. Children are... their universe begins and ends with them. So if something isn't clear, they will turn it onto themselves, and we don't want to encourage that. The other thing I think is not acknowledging that there has been a big change, really validating that little person's feelings and experiences is absolutely crucial.
Thank you for that. So the context of Dad's house is a child being introduced to living a life between two homes. So Renee, what are some practical ways parents or carers can make those transitions feel smoother and more secure for children?
There's lots of different things, and watching the film again tonight, I recognised the moment where Sadie is sitting in the car and really wanting Mum to make what we call the bridge between the parents, so to walk with her to the door. And that's a beautiful kind of metaphor, and for what we hope parents can do eventually is to kind of create a good bridge when they're making those transitions. I've got to acknowledge that we have a lot of family violence. That's not always possible. So where that's not possible, making transitions at school can help, using services like RA's Children's Contact Service, those kinds of things. But where conflict is lower, what we want to do is making that bridge. Having a simple goodbye is also very helpful, so kids don't feel like it's prolonged. So lots of different ways we can support children in those transitions.
Another common question that we received was around how to help children understand parents' separation without overwhelming or burdening them. So, Mary, how do you suggest parents explain a separation in a way that helps children make sense of it without placing too much emotional weight on their shoulders?
I think consistency and clarity with explanations, keeping our language really, really child-centred. And again, as Renee said, we understand that family violence is extraordinarily common. So we're talking in a context that things are safe. But to be sharing the same information from both parents, we find is really, really helpful for children to understand what's going on. If we think separation is a huge thing for adults to process and to deal with and to move on from, when we're expecting little people with little brains to make those same connections in the same sort of timeline. They're little brains, they don't understand the emotion and the feelings and the history behind things, and that makes it even more difficult. So if we can keep things age appropriate and simple, and for the information that's shared to be the same between both families.
Thank you. And your last point leads into the next question, as we had a lot surrounding the idea of co-parenting and how parents can make it work without compromising their own well-being. So Renee, what advice would you give to parents and carers trying to co-parent, and how can they look after their mental health in the process?
I guess my advice is, if needed, in the grief and loss process, to reach out to professionals and not be afraid to get that support, that external support. Often we really rely on friends and our families, and after the 50th time you've talked about your separation, that can really wear down our friends and family. So getting that professional support is really helpful. And I think just looking after yourself, if you're not with your kids, if your children are with the other parent, to just do things that fill your cup, that give you a little bit of joy, particularly in the early stages. So just give yourself that time to heal and reach out for support if needed.
And so we know that some children may not process the emotional impact of their family separation until they reach young adulthood. Renee, what kind of support is available for young adults who might only now be starting to reflect on their childhood experiences, and how can they begin to access that support?
We have support for children at RA up to 18 years in a counselling capacity called SCAS, Supporting Children After Separation. If you're a bit older, you can access the adult service, but I would say even just going to your GP, Headspace offers a lot of one-to-one, and also sort of online chat forums if you're not comfortable in doing the face-to-face.
Thank you. And for our final question tonight, how can community, schools, friends or extended family members play a role in helping these young people build resilience during a family separation? So Mary, we'll start with you, and then Renee, if you want to add on afterwards.
Thank you. Again, I think it's about acknowledging that there's been a change. That really validates a child's experience, but as a friend of a family of separation, or as one of those extended family networks, cherish that little person, cherish those people. Let them know that you're still there, that the relationship with them is still there. Parents separate and there's ex-husbands and ex-wives, but there are no ex-grandparents. There's no ex-aunties and uncles. And I think that's so important for a little person to understand that their world still exists. It might look a little bit different, but it's still there, and they can still rely on that world and they can still trust it.
Did you have anything to add, Renee?
Yeah, I just really want to reinforce what Mary said there. Moving closer, not away, and really listen. I think that was in the documentary where someone said just the power of listening, and it is so important, so basic. We know that really it takes about 2 years for separated families to kind of move out of that grief phase and start to consolidate their new lives. So just recognising that kids are going to be, it's going to be going on for a while. If anyone is really worried about a child, I would really encourage you to talk to, say, families, or call the family advice line, which is a place, if you've got safety concerns in particular.
Thank you both so much for joining us tonight, and also thank you for Relationships Australia, or to Relationships Australia, for all of your support throughout this project. And thank you all for being a part of this conversation as well.